Hello and welcome back to Bookish. Today I wanted to do a review, discussion of sorts, of Silas Marner by George Eliot. This is the first book I read for Victober, and if you're watching this, it's October the 10th, and you're probably thinking, my goodness, you only read one slim volume in 10 days of Victober. Well, I actually finished this book over the weekend, but I usually do a tag video on Tuesday, so that's what I did. And so I'm filming this video on Wednesday. I am almost finished with my Thomas Hardy experiment, and I am looking forward to it. I've dipped into the Queen Victoria biography that I planned on reading, and I'm looking forward to Wuthering Heights, The Warden, and Kidnapped later on. But I did read this first. I wanted to get started with something relatively short, and this was a holdover from my TBR for Victober last year. So it was kind of like my top priority to finish this. In my edition here, it's only, 186 pages, but I will say that Eliot's writing, to me, can be a little dense. I don't mean that in terms of stupid, but there's a lot of layers, a lot of vocabulary in there. There's a lot of description, and so oftentimes that slows me down. Plus, in my edition, which is the cheapest possible used edition I could find, not acid-free paper, the paper's turned brown and the print's relatively small, and the margins run into the, can you see that? The margins actually run into the crease of the book. Made it a little bit more difficult. Anyway, all that aside. So this is my first book by George Eliot. I started small. I didn't go with the big ones, Mill and the Floss, Middlemarch, even Adam Bede I think is pretty big. I went for something small, and I'm glad that I did. I enjoyed Silas Marner a good deal more than I thought I would. I was surprised by Eliot as a writer, as a creator of scenes and atmosphere, as a creator of characters. I was really pleasantly surprised by Silas Marner, and I'm glad that I read it. In lots of ways, it is an incredibly beautiful story of love and redemption, and in some senses justice as well. There's pretty much the big emotions are contained here in this small book. So the book tells the story of a man named Silas Marner. Marner is a weaver by trade, and we pick him up as he's moved to this small town, really out in the middle of nowhere in the country. And one of the things I think is remarkable about Silas Marner and Eliot's writing is that she creates this little universe around this community, and she populates it with people who may be stereotypical, and her drawing of country life and country people may be overly harsh, but she creates this atmosphere that is necessary for her story to take place. And there's Silas Marner in the middle of this. As an outsider, he is immediately suspect. Many people think that he has some kind of powers, that he has some kind of almost witchcraft-like powers. He is a terror to kids, and he mostly keeps himself to himself. We later learn that Silas has been the victim of, he's been framed for a crime which he didn't commit, and this essentially, that framing broke his heart, destroyed his faith in God to a certain extent, and he's moved out to the countryside to get away from all of that, and he intends to essentially live his life out by himself. He's skilled at his job, he's a good weaver, and so he starts to make money, and as he makes money, he becomes obsessed with the money he makes. He literally covets it, falls in love with it, counts it, stacks it, is obsessed with this money. Obviously, this obsession with money doesn't turn out well, and then Silas becomes essentially the guardian to a young foundling, a young girl whose mother has died from an opium overdose. He becomes her guardian, he raises her, he is a caring, loving father, and she grows up to love and adore him. He does the best he can to raise her so that she will fit in with the village. He is helped by a female villager who's married to a man and has kids of her own, and her advice is humorous, and she's dealt with, I think, gently and in a funny manner, and Silas raises his young daughter. Only later do we learn, or we know as the readers, who her father is, who her real father is, even though he doesn't step forward to claim her until it's too late. And we learn, about her background, her real father's background, her real father's family, and how disturbing, or how we learn about her real father's kind of dysfunctional family with an overbearing father and a rake of a brother who is up to no good all the time. And we learn about her real father's mistakes, and yet his marriage to what is considered to be the most beautiful and upright young woman in the community. And all these characters and all these pieces just kind of fit together really perfectly at the end, so that when you get to the end of the book, the overall feeling you get is of just kind of a beautiful love story, not between a man and a woman, but between a parent and their child, and that kind of devotion and the power of redemption. All those things are in this really slim little book, as well as, like I said, a sense of social justice. I was impressed by how topical to today's world parts of Silas Marner were. The idea of a child being essentially orphaned and having to be raised by either strangers or other members of their family. The idea of opium addiction and opioid overdoses. You can read the newspaper or look online or watch the news all the time, and we hear these terrible stories about parents who OD on opioids with their kids in the car or in the middle of a grocery store with their kid with them, and that's reflected in Silas Marner. And I realize now that I've started talking about it that my review discussion of Silas Marner has been somewhat rambling and not particularly structured, and I'm sorry for that, but I just would say that I think Eliot's writing is beautiful here, and her characterization is great. If there's any criticism I have, and I think this is just a criticism that a modern reader might have looking back on a piece of Victorian literature, is that there's too much foreshadowing. The foreshadowing of events is obvious, and it occurs like clockwork before every major event it occurs, and that therefore it kind of takes some of the surprise out of the novel, I think. But other than that, I just really enjoyed Silas Marner. I'm glad I read it. It got my Victober off to a good start. I'm looking forward to finishing up my Thomas Hardy book today, and then moving on to other books. Anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know if you've read Silas Marner. Let me know what you think about my rambling, confused discussion of it in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.